All right, we're going to be looking at the Greater Middle East Test Review. You should have one in front of you. Question number 1 is dealing with physical geography, climate, and vegetation. Question 1 says, why is the Sinai Peninsula so important to the region? Remember, the Sinai Peninsula connects the Mediterranean Sea to the Red Sea, and it reflects a vital trade route for this area. Basically, if you can control the Sinai Peninsula, you control the connection of this region to the Mediterranean Sea, which controls trade to Europe and the rest of the world. Number 2, why is this area considered a region based off of these factors? And what I mean by these factors here is physical geography, climate, and vegetation. This region shares the same fundamental climate zones, that is, deserts and steppes. Remember, deserts, very, very dry areas, don't receive a lot of rainfall. And then steppes is kind of your step between a desert and a grassland. It's kind of grassy. In this area, when we're looking at steppes, it's the Lion King. All the scenes of the Lion King were shot in the steppe region. Both of these, steppes and deserts, are growing and shifting in this area as a whole because of what is known as desertification, which is the desert growing because of human as well as climatic conditions. These two climate zones influence what people do for a living because if you're just going to live off of the land, this is not really a region that you would want to move to. Number 3, how does physical geography affect the location of people in the region? The population in this region is congregated around water, especially the rivers. The 3 major rivers of this region that we've talked about is the Nile River in Egypt, and then the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers in Iran and Iraq. The biggest part of the rest of this region is desert, and people will not live in the desert unless there's petroleum deposits. The world's largest desert, in the Sahara Desert, is the main reason that people live in only 3% of the land available in this region. Number 4, how are people combating the lack of water? People have created desalination plants. These desalination plants remove the salt from seawater and make it drinkable. But this is a very, very, very expensive process. Moving on to the next section of questions, history and government. Number 1, why is the city of Jerusalem so divided? Throughout history, Jerusalem is a city that has been regarded as important for all of the 3 major monotheistic faiths of this region, which are Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Jerusalem has had a history of occupation by several different cultural groups in addition to these 3 major monotheistic faiths, and it has constantly been an area where people want control of. Number 2, in the late 20th century, what has affected migration patterns? Refugees fleeing from conflicts have changed where people live in this region because of terrorism and other ventures that have created consistent wars in the region. These consistent wars, as well as the occupation of these areas by other nations, have created refugees, which is talking about people who are displaced because of one reason or another. Number 3, what is Zionism? Following World War II, there has been a major migration of Jews back into Palestine. This historical claim to the land made by Jewish leaders is known as Zionism. The British have supported Zionism, and because of British success in World War II, this has allowed the Jews to reclaim much of this land. Now moving on to the culture of this region. Number 1, why is this region culturally linked? Because of the religious traditions of the 3 major monotheistic faiths of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. That is why this region is culturally linked, in addition to the major ethnic group of the Arabs, which has linked the region culturally, but especially focus on those 3 monotheistic faiths and their connection with this region. Number 2, what types of languages do we see in this area, and what language is most dominant? This region is home to a variety of languages, including Turkish, Arabic, Persian, and Hebrew, which is the language of the Jews. The Arabic language and the Arab ethnicity is the most dominant in this region. Number 3, contrast the spatial diffusion of Islam to Christianity. Both of these faiths originated in the Middle East, but Christianity spread more to other parts of the world than did Islam. Islam predominantly dominates this region of the greater Middle East. There's also a majority in Spain, a region in Europe. But then outside of Spain, Islam hasn't really had a stronghold in Europe, unlike Christianity. Christianity has taken over the West, and especially Europe, and then moved to North America because of the European conquests. Number 4, what are the 5 pillars of Islam? And list them. Number 1, the five pillars is kind of the law code and the way you're supposed to live your life according to this faith. The 5 pillars are, number 1, a profession of faith, recognizing that Muhammad is the prophet. Number 2, pray 5 times a day facing the city of Mecca. Number 3, take a pilgrimage to Mecca, known as the Hajj. Number 4, giving of alms, giving to charity. And number 5, fasting during the holiday of Ramadan. Question number 5. Why has Jerusalem been a much fought over city? Again, all 3 major monotheistic faiths hold that this city is very important. All the way back to the Crusades in 1066 AD, there's been constant fighting between Islam as well as Christianity and Judaism over this city, and it never has stopped. Even today, you see fighting going on in the greater Middle East as a whole, but especially in the Jerusalem region, because you have these 3 different faiths living in the same region, all wanting to have control of that region. Living in the greater Middle East today, number 1, what natural resource links this area as a region? That is petroleum deposits, more specifically oil. The availability of these petroleum deposits not only connects the region, but also affects the economies. Number 2, how does oil affect the standards of living in this region? Basically, if you have oil, you're more than likely going to have very high standards of living. And what I mean by standards of living is life expectancy is high, you have a high literacy rate, you're making a lot of money, GDP per capita, those sorts of things that make living life well. The lack of oil in this region is not a good thing because you're probably severely less developed, and more than likely you probably have a traditional type of society. And one of the reasons why this is a very less developed region is because of the climate. You've got desert and steppe, and you can't live off the land if it's a desert and steppe climate. Number 3, what is the fastest growing city in the world and why? The fastest growing city in the world is Dubai, which is located in the United Arab Emirates. And it's the fastest growing city in the world because of its infrastructure and its ability to create a great economy, which all revolves around the abundance of oil, petroleum deposits. Number 4, describe the Arab Spring. The Arab Spring was a governmental change that occurred in many countries in this region. It began in social media, and the reason that it began in social media is because the governments could not control the social media like they could media in general. In other words, these strong authoritarian governments could control what was on TV, they could control what was being published on the radio, and they could control what was being published on newspapers, but they couldn't control social media. And because of Facebook and Twitter, revolutions occurred that brought about more free governments instead of the authoritarian regimes which have dominated this region throughout history. Number 5, what is the Gaza Strip and the West Bank? And how has the Israeli government controlled the Gaza Strip and the West Bank? These are land areas that were given to the Palestinians by the Israelis. The Israeli government back in 2007 issued blockades on the Gaza Strip, trying to strip them dry and force their hand to join back with Palestine. They wanted to make sure that this region would not succeed, and they wanted to gain control of this region yet again. And if you're still listening, good for you, because I'm going to kind of help you out in your free responses a little bit. Now, your free response questions are coming off of your essential questions, which we've discussed every day in class. So make sure you know that, and make sure you can explain. I had a lot of people that really did good at listing things, but did not do a good job of going into detail. There's two free response questions. One of the free response questions is going to look at the location of people in this region and why they live where they live. So make sure you go back and look at where people are living and why they are living and what may make them live where they live or not live where they don't live, if that made any sense. Your second free response question is going to be looking at the division of this region or these land masses. But more specifically, we're going to be looking at why these three separate areas in the world are considered one region. I want you to look at this culturally as well as the climate reasons why they would be considered one region. Again, make sure you can go in and really explain that. But hopefully you're listening to this and you got the hint on what the free response questions are going to be so that you can really ace the test.